with Iron Haven. We have a rowing assessment today in class, and I want to talk about some of the most common faults that you'll see on the rower, as well as a few tips and tricks to help make your rowing experience just a little bit better. One of the most common errors I usually see is not starting at the proper catch position with the shoulders just slightly in front of the hips. So most often when people are rowing, they'll start their catch leaning back with the shoulders behind the hips and their heels very far off of the pads. And what this does is it emphasizes more push through your quads and not really utilizing those glutes. You also lose a lot of the drive that you would get through changing your back angle through the stroke. Because if you're already starting backward, there's not really more for your back to go when you do finish the stroke, and you do get a little bit extra when you finish in changing that back angle. For somebody that doesn't have a lot of good body awareness of where this catch position is have somebody find this spot where they're starting, heels maybe just a couple millimeters off the pads, shoulders in front of the hips, and I want you to notice where the handle is in relation to either the cradle or the top of the foot pads, or how much chain is left. And you want them to try to match that same spot every single time, or the same amount of chain. Often having this visual cue will help someone reach that same position every single time. So if they're not bringing that chain to the same amount, they know that they're not hitting that same catch position. They're either starting too far behind or leaning too far forward. Next, you want to make sure that you're really using your legs in the entirety of the rowing stroke and not just the arms. So a couple ways to do that: make sure that you're holding the handles just in your fingers and not your whole palm. If you're using your entire hand and you're gripping too tight, you're going to want to pull more aggressively with the arms. If you let the handle just sit right in your fingers and allow a little bit of twinkle fingers, this is going to ensure that your legs and body are putting more into the stroke and you're not just prematurely pulling with the arms. Start the drive with your feet and your legs, so push with your heels into the pads like you're doing a deadlift. And you want to not only push through your quads, but you also want to think about squeezing your butt too. I know it's kind of weird when you're sitting on the seat. That's going to ensure that you're using all of your leg and not just the top of your leg where you might feel the most burn. Another common mistake that I usually see is not finishing the pull all the way. Someone will do their rowing stroke, and then they'll start to bend the knees too soon on the way in, rather than finish pulling with the arms and then returning with the arms first. If you try to return your body in before finishing pulling your stroke all the way, you've just shorted yourself a lot of extra power that you could have gotten just by pulling that extra length. Rowing is really favorable for taller athletes, so you want to pretend that you're 7 feet tall, regardless of how short or tall you are. If you can pull like you are a very tall person, then you're gonna automatically get a lot more power into each stroke. So one of the keys that I usually like to give in order to help somebody who tends to shorten their pull is to punch the arms back first. So I'll have someone finish their drive, keep their legs straight longer, and then punch the arms back and then return. And often if you've practiced not doing this, if you're so used to bending the knees, you might want to practice slowing down your stroke and pausing deliberately at each position so that you can get that ingrained. So start with it very robotic at first, and then you can allow it to smooth and punch more relaxed as you go back in. So I like to think of the rowing stroke in 3 counts. 1 is the drive, 2 is the arms returning, and then 3 is the legs returning. What that's going to look like is the drive is 1, arms 2, legs 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I usually like to teach beginners this 1, 2, 3 rhythm because it teaches them that the drive is the fastest and the most powerful part of the stroke, and that the recovery is almost twice as long. So you're recovering with the arms first, so get it ingrained that arms return first, so you don't return with your legs first, and then 3 is the legs returning. And that's just gonna make sure that you're putting the pattern of that rowing stroke in the correct order. One of my favorite displays that I like to give new members is this graph. So if you hit the display button a couple of times, you'll get this XY graph. And as you start rowing, you are going to see a hill that pops up. So let me show you what that looks like. What this hill represents is your power output and the length of your stroke. The higher the hill is, the more power you have. The longer the hill is, the longer your stroke is. A really good way to tell if someone is efficient with their stroke is what that curve looks like. Ideally, you want that curve to be an even semicircle. What that shows you is that you have speed through the middle of your stroke. You're not starting too hard, you're not finishing too hard, but you're putting in that consistent effort across your entire stroke. Often if someone's hill is really high at the start, it means that they have too much power or too hard of a catch right at the front, and they're not finishing their pull all the way. Often you might see that spike near the end of the hill, which means that someone is starting a little bit too soft and then they're finally getting speed near the end of the stroke. One of the best things you can do is just have this graph up for a couple of minutes as you are warming up and just kind of see as a visual what that hill looks like, and then you can adjust your speed at the front or at the back or through the middle of your stroke to make sure that that is as even of a hill as possible. One of the last things I want to go over is stroke speed and how going too fast or having too high of a stroke speed is actually going to not benefit you in the long run. If you're going to do a longer assessment, such as 20 minutes, you don't want to be going over 30 strokes a minute. Think of the amount of strokes that you're going to do across 20 minutes. If you're going 25 strokes a minute versus 30, that's an extra 5 strokes a minute times 20, which is an extra 100 times that you are bending your knees and bringing your arms back in. So you don't want to do an extra 100 strokes. What you want to focus on is trying to bring that pace down, but keeping that stroke rate lower. So rather than going super fast, having a higher stroke rate means more times that your body has to go in and out, which is going to be more exhausting for you, rather than lowering that stroke rate down to something about mid-20s and keeping it at a manageable pace. Having a slower stroke rate also allows you to recover just a little bit better between your strokes so that you can really put more power in each drive. You'll notice that my pace stayed exactly the same, regardless of if I was rowing 35 strokes a minute versus 25 strokes a minute. And that's a difference of 200 strokes across 20 minutes. Would you rather be going in and out 200 extra times? I don't think so. Focus on the quality of each stroke, not necessarily how fast you are going, which is probably good for short sprints, such as under 500 meters, but really focus on the quality of every single stroke, recovering and then driving hard with each one.